$400 million, gone in a heartbeat. That is what countless stunned gamers whispered in disbelief when Sony shut down Concord, the ill-fated PlayStation original, just 2 weeks after its official release. How could one of the global gaming industry's most storied giants let such an extravagant project crumble so quickly? Today, we dive headfirst into the perplexing saga of Concord, exposing the triumphs, the failures, and most importantly, the stubborn stance Sony has taken on the day-one launch of first-party games for PlayStation Plus. Will the company's conservative approach continue to protect its bottom line, or has the time come for a strategic pivot that could redefine the entire PlayStation ecosystem? In this in-depth look, we will peel back every layer of this dramatic fiasco, exploring why Concord's rapid downfall could be a warning sign of even stormier skies ahead. We will investigate whether Sony's success with premium single-player blockbusters like The Last of Us and God of War justifies its aversion to offering day-one exclusives on PS Plus, and how Xbox's rival initiative with Game Pass might be shifting the balance of the so-called console wars. We have a lot of ground to cover, from Concord's spectacular rise and immediate decline to the persistent question of whether day-one releases could save certain live service ventures from total collapse. We will also examine how Microsoft's Game Pass is changing the rules of engagement, pushing Sony to reevaluate its own subscription model. Finally, we will see whether the tale of Concord might just be repeated with Sony's future titles, all because of an unyielding belief that day one is an unnecessary gamble. So, buckle up, because this is a tale brimming with corporate drama, shattered dreams, and a stubborn refusal to adopt the seemingly unstoppable day-and-date revolution. Let us journey back to the beginning. Concord was supposed to be Sony's towering success story for the year 2024. While details were scarce in its earliest marketing material, the promotional teasers promised a bold new vision for team-based shooters, an exciting departure from the more traditional single-player narratives that had earned Sony monumental acclaim. Talk of slick, futuristic weapons, cooperative play, dynamic hero abilities, and a massive storyline brimming with high-stakes encounters drew in an immediate fan following. From the outside, it looked almost guaranteed to become the next big thing for the PlayStation brand. Then came the staggering revelations. The game's development budget had spiraled out of control, apparently cresting $400 million by the time it was finally deployed. Such a monumental investment often comes with equally monumental expectations. With that price tag, the industry rumor mill was roaring. Whispers of advanced technology, revolutionary game mechanics, and an ambitious post-launch roadmap set the hype ablaze. However, the hype was short-lived. Within 2 weeks of Concord's official release date, Sony made the unexpected announcement that the game was being discontinued. Community forums across the internet went berserk. How could a project that had cost hundreds of millions of dollars and years of development time crumble so fast? Some fans felt betrayed, some were just disappointed, and others shrugged it off as yet another cautionary tale about the unpredictability of live service shooters. If you are hearing this story for the first time, you might already be wondering, was there no way to save this game? Could Sony have done something differently at the final hour? Perhaps a last-ditch strategy to gather a bigger population of curious players and keep Concord afloat longer? The most common theory floating about among analysts is that Sony's decision to avoid offering Concord as a day-one free title through PlayStation Plus severely limited the influx of potential customers. Nick Maguire, Sony's vice president of global services, was steadfast in affirming that Sony had no interest in placing first-party games on its subscription service immediately upon release. According to Maguire, day-one exclusives are not part of Sony's strategy, at least for now. And that is a head-scratcher for many, particularly when Microsoft's Game Pass has embraced the exact opposite style of thinking. Xbox fans revel in titles that appear in their Game Pass libraries the moment they launch, generating plenty of buzz across social media and live streaming platforms from day one. So, is Sony missing an opportunity to keep pace in these subscription model wars? Could day one access have amplified the initial wave of player engagement for Concord, transforming its 2-week meltdown into something less catastrophic? In the realm of live service games, success frequently hinges on the presence of a robust and active player base. Service-driven titles such as Overwatch, Apex Legends, and other big-name shooters remain so popular because people can dive in quickly and easily, often without paying any upfront cost. By the same token, even if Concord had not been entirely free for everyone, Offering it directly to millions of PlayStation Plus subscribers on day one might have proven a game changer. After all, removing financial barriers can dramatically increase the number of interested participants just willing to give it a shot. Sometimes, it only takes a spark of interest to convince gamers to stay invested, especially if the core mechanics are engaging, the progression is fluid, and the in-game community feels vibrant. Of course, it is possible that Concord's demise had deeper roots than just a small player base. We may never know the specifics of what went wrong behind the scenes, whether the game was suffering from unbalanced hero abilities, repetitive missions, or excessive microtransactions. Still, the decision not to at least experiment with a Day 1 PS Plus approach remains a fascinating missed opportunity. There is no magic bullet guarantee that Day 1 distribution would have saved Concord from its spectacular downfall, but considering the game was thoroughly canceled in under a month, it begs the question, why not try? Before we proceed, if this shocking meltdown made you gasp, do consider tapping that like button. It helps us know when a story hits home. Indeed, the very fact of Concord's ephemeral existence is a testament to how quickly the modern gaming landscape can shift beneath a publisher's feet. Gamers today are flooded with options, and they will not hesitate to switch gears from one game to the next if the initial experience feels unpolished or underwhelming. Now, we must look more closely at what underpins Sony's reservations about Day 1 first-party releases. From the company's perspective, there is no real urgency to pile on freebies when major single-player hits such as The Last of Us Part 2 or the latest God of War can rake in massive sales at full price. Sony has built much of its reputation on these narrative-rich experiences, and fans have shown that they are happy to stand in line on launch day, cash in hand, to snag these AAA titles. Indeed, the track record for these blockbusters garners consistent success. Why would Sony risk cannibalizing sales by letting them go free to subscribers right away? But not every game is a guaranteed golden goose. That is precisely what Concord's failure highlights. Live service shooters rely on continuous community engagement, daily logins, and recurring revenue streams generated by cosmetic purchases or battle passes. When the main selling point is large-scale multiplayer showdowns, the only way to stand out among established giants is by building an enthusiastic user base as rapidly as possible. Charging $60 or $70 for an unknown new IP puts an enormous barrier between the prospective player and the experience. Next, let us place Sony's inertia under the microscope a bit more closely. The subscription models for PS Plus have typically offered older games for free, along with a curated selection of mid-tier or indie releases that debut day and date on the service, roughly 4 or 5 a year. This cyclical approach has proven profitable for Sony, doing wonders for longevity and fueling cyclical subscriber growth. However, many analysts argue that the inflexible nature of the system might stifle potential for more adventurous experiments. Suppose Sony had allowed just some of its riskier first-party releases, specifically live service or multiplayer-focused ones, the chance to appear instantly on PS Plus. That might have opened the door for enormous waves of early adopters, creating positive word of mouth and future brand loyalty. At the very least, the game would have a shot at establishing a presence among the player base. Many point to Xbox's bold approach with Game Pass as an example. By making titles, including first-party blockbusters, immediately available to subscribers, Microsoft ensures that even its riskier experiments, like bleeding-edge live service projects, have a built-in audience from day one. This approach involves accepting a relatively high level of financial risk. There are no guaranteed massive upfront sales from unusual or untested concepts. But it also encourages gameplay variety, community building, and the possibility for hidden gems to flourish. Perhaps the best example of the success of this strategy emerges whenever a sleeper hit rises to popularity, quickly inspiring a flood of fan content, streams, and word-of-mouth excitement. In an interview with GameFile, Nick McGuire insisted that Sony's approach is working well. He explained that they are more interested in showcasing 4 or 5 independent day-and-date releases on PS Plus per year, while bigger first-party games are slotted in around 12 or 18 months post-launch. Sony sees this as a balanced system. They earn the bulk of sales revenue when a game is brand new, and then later they add it to PS Plus as a perk to attract lingering fans who did not buy the game at release. It might be a strategy that works wonders for single-player story-driven titles, but it leaves little room for the dynamic needs of live service games. We arrive at the next big question. Could Concord have fared better had it not relied on a premium purchase model? Even if day one access alone was not enough to salvage it, the free barrier to entry might have allowed a larger player base to sample the game's brand of futuristic firefights. Even just a temporary surge in user activity could have fueled a wave of community feedback, helping developers refine any wonky balancing issues. That might have bought Concord enough time for feature updates, bug fixes, and marketing re-rollouts. Instead, reliance on full retail sales doomed the new IP's initial momentum. There is also the matter of brand trust. Sony's name carries weight with its fan base, no doubt, but gamers are not immune to the feeling of too many shooters, not enough reason to buy. The market is saturated. Overwatch, Apex Legends, and countless other contenders already exist. And if gamers sniff even a hint of underwhelming content, they will pivot to a different shooter overnight. Concord's downfall, swift as it was, might be a harbinger of a new problem. If Sony is indeed continuing to invest in live service or multiplayer ventures, is the company prepared to shift its business strategy to give these fresh ventures at least a fighting chance? We then land on a more personal angle, the game developers who poured their passion into Concord. When a project of this scale is canceled abruptly, the entire creative team is left reeling. Had the day one approach at least extended the game's lifespan, more of their creative vision might have reached a receptive audience. One wonders whether the heartbreak for those developers could have been mitigated if only the game had gone live on PS Plus from the start. There is an undeniable link between day one access and community building, especially if a game revolves around large-scale matches where you rely on big populations for quick matchmaking. A major frustration for new shooters is the dreaded "there are not enough players online" syndrome. If a significant chunk of the player population bails out in the first week, the game can die a slow death unless drastic measures are taken. But day one availability to potentially millions of PS Plus subscribers can infuse a game with a healthy community right away, ensuring that no one is left gazing at a matchmaking screen for minutes on end. Still, we must remember that Sony is not your typical underdog in this scenario. It is a gaming behemoth with a track record of colossal success in the single-player sphere. Why ruin a good thing from Sony's perspective, especially when the majority of its blockbuster hits keep raking in profits with minimal fuss? It all circles back to that philosophical difference between Sony and Microsoft. Does unwavering caution risk missing out on potential hits, or is it a wise approach that keeps the company's revenue streams predictable? The question becomes even more vexed when considering the potential for day one releases to deter core consumers from buying new games outright. Sony is presumably keen to avoid the possibility that fans might ask, why pay full price when it will be free on day one in my subscription? However, with changing consumer behavior, rising subscription costs, and new players entering the market, that reticence might come at a real cost. And the fiasco that was Concord could act as a turning point, or at least a cautionary lesson. The fiasco might serve as the impetus for internal debates at Sony about how best to handle future live service experiments. One approach for the future might be offering partial day one access or a free multiplayer suite for PS Plus subscribers, while selling a story campaign or extra content separately. Another approach might be restricting day one access to special editions of PS Plus, bridging the gap between a total free day one drop and the standard premium purchase model. Before we proceed further, if all these twists and turns have you riveted, this is a perfect moment to invite you to subscribe. That way, you will never miss our next big story that might make or break the gaming world. After all, who knows which colossal gaming bombshell might drop next week? Now, if we look beyond Concord, the question becomes, does Sony risk more ruinous failures in the future if it remains committed to its rigid policy? The company has admitted that it is eyeing more live service releases, presumably to diversify beyond single-player blockbusters and place a bigger footprint on the lucrative world of ongoing multiplayer communities. Yet these live service projects often demand an avalanche of players at launch to build momentum and demonstrate viability. When prospective players spot a $60 or $70 price tag, especially for an unknown IP, most will stand back warily, deciding it is easier to stick with the free-to-play juggernauts they already enjoy. Meanwhile, we see a potential storm brewing for PlayStation Plus itself, as controversies swirl around price hikes. Subscribers are beginning to ask, why am I paying more for fewer benefits compared to what Xbox Game Pass is offering? Indeed, Many have pointed out that day one content can be a powerful sweetener for a subscription, motivating people to stick around or even upgrade to higher tiers. Sony's reluctance to match that value proposition could eventually chip away at the brand's enormous popularity among dedicated gamers. All this begs the question, is the fiasco of Concord truly a self-contained tragedy, or does it foreshadow a bigger problem for Sony's brand identity in the gaming world? Many fans are not quite ready to declare it a final verdict. After all, the company has soared to the top with countless triumphs. And yet, the saga underscores the importance of adaptability in a market that evolves at lightning speed. Even fans deeply loyal to Sony's ecosystems have grown increasingly vocal about wanting more immediate access to new releases, particularly for games that are not guaranteed to become runaway hits. Plenty of players in the community still wonder aloud, if Sony wants to keep certain expansions or single-player epics behind a full retail price tag, so be it. But maybe it should not treat every single new IP the same way. Perhaps the Concord example is precisely the scenario that calls for an exception, showing that adopting a more flexible policy on day one access could mean the difference between a short-lived fiasco and a modestly successful rebound. A day one PS Plus launch would have drastically lowered the risk factor for curious gamers. Even if a fraction of them stuck around, that could have provided valuable data for developers to refine the title and roll out improvements in real time. That approach works wonders for early access games on certain platforms, cultivating loyal communities that invest in shaping the game's future. By building strong word of mouth, those communities create an organic marketing cycle that resonates far more than any fleeting advertising campaign. Of course, the entire fiasco also highlights the delicate balance Sony must navigate between its bread-and-butter single-player blockbusters and the uncertain waters of live service or multiplayer projects. One might recall the controversy around certain older shooters or spin-off multiplayer expansions that did not exactly capture the hearts and minds of the broader gaming world. The difference is that the financial stakes were not quite so astronomical. Concord's catastrophic downfall turned into front-page news, largely because of that staggering $400 million price tag. It became a perfect storm of hype, cost, and an abrupt, ignominious end. Yet, for all its reluctance, Sony's stance may remain successful as long as the company keeps releasing top-tier exclusives that reel in a massive audience willing to pay full price. From a purely financial perspective, Sony might well decide that day one releases simply are not necessary to maintain healthy profit margins. Indeed, why risk the unstoppable revenue from major hits when the conservative approach is already paying enormous dividends? However, the crucial insight here is that not every game can match the star power of The Last of Us or God of War. Not every release can promise a rich, story-driven experience worthy of cinematic praise that players cannot resist purchasing outright on day one. That unblinking business logic might hold water for the cream-of-the-crop titles, but new experiments, particularly those in the live service category, can flop spectacularly if not nurtured with the right approach. And so, one must wonder if Sony might ultimately adopt a hybrid strategy in the future. Perhaps eventually, day one first-party releases will appear on PS Plus under specific circumstances, or for certain genres like shooters dependent on critical mass. The story of Concord underlines just how merciless the live service arena can be if a game does not get enough traction in its infancy. In the end, is Concord a glitch in Sony's system or a harbinger of a wider shift in the industry landscape? On one hand, it is entirely possible this was a solitary misfire that taught valuable lessons about budgeting, marketing, and community management. On the other hand, it might be the opening salvo that persuades Sony to reevaluate its unwavering stance on day one releases for certain high-risk projects. After all, ignoring how quickly the gaming market changes could leave even corporate titans vulnerable. One cannot help but sense that the conversation is far from over. While gamers mourn or mock the short-lived Concord, existential questions about Sony's future direction remain. If the company continues to increase subscription fees without offering new release benefits, will that push some longtime fans to look elsewhere, as many have already done in pursuit of day one availability through Game Pass? Or does the prestige of PlayStation exclusives keep the brand bulletproof against such criticisms? At the core of everything is that tension between creative experimentation and risk management. Sony might prefer the stability of guaranteed sales, but ignoring day one distribution might stifle any attempt to produce a new Overwatch-level phenomenon, After all, major hits do not just appear out of thin air. They are nurtured by developers and supported by an enthusiastic community that invests time and energy for months and years on end. By the time a game eventually lands on PS Plus after a year or more, the opportunity to cultivate that early honeymoon period of interest may have slipped by. One has to imagine the high-level boardroom debates raging at Sony headquarters, especially in the aftermath of Concord's downfall. Did someone, somewhere, champion a Day 1 PS Plus release in a last-ditch attempt to salvage what was left of the disastrous launch? Or did internal calculations show that even a free rollout would not have been enough? Although such questions may never receive official answers, it is clear that the fiasco cannot merely be swept under the rug. We see signs of small shifts already, as Sony keeps analyzing and reevaluating its live service strategies in the face of a rapidly evolving market. So, was Concord a unique fluke buried by bigger fish in the shooter landscape, or is it a testament to Sony's missed possibilities? Ultimately, opinions vary. Some maintain it was a slow-motion train wreck from the start, plagued by questionable design decisions and overshadowed by fierce rivals. Others argue that Concord might have garnered a respectable audience had it tapped into the enormous subscription base of eager PlayStation Plus members. In the final calculation, it is perhaps best seen as a cautionary tale. Even a gaming giant like Sony can lose big money in the blink of an eye if it fails to adapt to the demands of modern players. No matter which side of the debate you fall on, one thing is certain: the gaming world has taken note of Concord's cautionary fate. Sony is on high alert, mindful that if it plans more forays into competitive multiplayer, it may need to embrace a bit more flexibility in how new releases reach the mass market. And for those holding out hope for day-and-date first-party games on PlayStation Plus, Concord is both an example of what might have been and a painful testament to what can happen without that early wave of user adoption. That is our sprawling look into Concord's meteoric fall and the broader implications for Sony's strategy. Was there a golden chance to save that ill-fated shooter, or was its rapid demise simply the result of unstoppable market forces? Only time will tell if Sony will remain firm or bend with the winds of a new era. With more live service games rumored to be on the horizon under the PlayStation banner, this question might be answered sooner than any of us expect. For now, the story of Concord stands as a giant neon warning sign. No matter how deep your corporate pockets, success in gaming can be fleeting when you do not seize your moment. Thank you for staying with us to the very end of this gripping story. We hope you found it as riveting as we did. If so, share your thoughts and pass this story along to a fellow gaming enthusiast. Until next time, keep your eyes open for that next big reveal, because in the world of gaming, truths can shift overnight, and you never know when the next daring experiment or catastrophic collapse will define an entire generation.